Hi, I'm Danny Karon, your lovable lawyer, here with your quick shot of legal wellness. You know, I did a video, I don't know, a few days ago, and I talked to my son, he's in high school, and I said, what are some issues you're dealing with online, and what are some concerns that, kids your age and maybe kids my age ought to be concerned with? And, he went through a few. And one of them involved something I figured, was a concern and should have thought to talk about even without talking to him. And it is online defamation, saying, posting stuff you shouldn't. And we do it all the time. People are putting stuff up and retweeting and, all this. And it's just, it can get you kind of in trouble if you don't have any idea from what the law is and what the limitations are and what you can and can't and should and shouldn't say. So I thought we would talk a little bit about defamation and what the heck it means and how it really channels through the internet. So you have some kind of guardrails in terms of what you should and shouldn't do, and maybe telling your kids what they should and shouldn't do. So when it comes to defamation, really the first question is, what is it? What's defamation mean? It's a legal term, but let's talk about it, obviously. Well, first of all, defamation law is controlled by the laws of the various states. It's a state law concept, and each state has its own version of it, but they tend to kind of look at it the same way. And defamation is generally defined as a false and unprivileged statement of fact that's harmful to someone's reputation and published with fault, meaning as a result of negligence or malice. Now, defamation kind of branches into two areas. Statements like that fall into kind of one or two types. Libel and slander. You've probably heard both those. Libel and slander, they're both types of defamation. What's the difference? Well, libel has to do with when you put something in writing. Slander has to do when you say it, when it's spoken. And the way I remember the difference is, I think, libel, literature, writing it down. That's the written defamation. And slander, saying it, spoken. That's the spoken defamation. So those are the two types of defamation you want to keep in mind. Now, the general elements, we call it, of a defamation claim, meaning if somebody's going to sue you, what do they have to prove to the judge or the jury to get money from you or some other type of damage that they're suing for? Well, there are a few things to keep in mind. And think now about whether things you've said might trigger these elements. One, it's got to be a publication to someone other than the person defamed, meaning you. Two, it's got to be a false statement of fact. Can't be true. Three, and that false statement of fact has to be understood as either A, being of and concerning to you, the plaintiff, and tending to cause you harm, to your reputation. So if you've been on the receiving end of a statement that makes you feel that way and qualifies, that might trigger defamation claim by you against somebody else. Now, if you're a public figure, you have to also prove actual malice. It's a higher standard if you're, an athlete or an actress or the president. Now, how do you defend against a defamation claim? Let's say rather than you're pursuing one, you're on the receiving end of one. What's your defense? Well, the truth is an absolute defense. If what you said is true, there's really no defamation there. But the truth can be elusive, and it can be hard to prove, and it can be expensive. So don't say something that you think might be true just so that you can prove it's truth, because that gets into an expensive lawsuit sometimes, and you don't want that. It's just not worth it. People sometimes ask me, well, hey, listen, can my opinion be defamatory? What if it's just my opinion? Well, no, generally it can't, but merely labeling something your opinion doesn't make it okay, doesn't make it an opinion, because in my opinion, and then you say something really, horrible about somebody. Courts looked at whether a reasonable reader or listener could understand your statement as asserting a verifiable fact. So it's a bit of a standard and exercise to work your way through as to whether an opinion is okay to say or not. Okay, let's say you do it. You publish an opinion or you say something more affirmative that's not even an opinion. Can you retract it? Or you can retract it, of course, but what if you retract it? Does that help your case? Well, certain states, or maybe more than certain states, have retraction statutes. Everything's a function of state law, remember? States have retraction statutes. But if you retract something, it really ought to, the retraction really ought to look substantially as conspicuous as the alleged defamation. You can't say something really, glitzy and brash as a defamation and then just kind of say as a footnote, oh, I didn't really mean it, I take it back. You've got to be as conspicuous in the retraction as you were in the defamation. Well, But what if you change the person's name? What if you don't use somebody's name, but you just kind of suggested somebody instead of naming him or her? Well, you needn't mention a person's name in order to defame them. The plaintiff need only be reasonably identifiable. If everybody knows who you're talking about, that's bad enough. That's good enough for a case, but it's bad enough for you. How about this? I talked about retweeting at the beginning. What if you republish somebody else's defamatory statement, like you retweet something that's really bad and you probably shouldn't have and wish you hadn't? Well, anyone who repeats someone else's statements is just as responsible for the defamatory content as the original speaker if they knew or had reason to know of the defamation. Now, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act provides protection against liability for internet intermediaries or go-betweens who provide or republish speech against others. If you do a lot of retweeting, you might want to take a look at that. Now, that's a lot to consider, so what are some real-life examples of defamatory versus non-defamatory speech or writing? How does it look in real life? Well, here's some examples that are not defamatory, or most likely not defamatory because everything channels through a judge, but you probably be in pretty safe shape. Well, let me switch it around. The defamatory ones I'll do first. Those are kind of more fun. Some defamatory statements would be, for instance, saying someone is a white supremacist. That's not good. Don't do that, unless it's true, right? How about saying a lawyer is a thief? That doesn't do so well for that lawyer's reputation, defamatory. How about accusing someone of being a child molester when he or she's not? That's not good either. You see where I'm going with this? Now, what are some examples of statements that aren't defamatory? Calling someone a jerk. Calling a political opponent a loser. Maybe saying somebody's full of it. Those are fairly benign. And you can see the difference, right? You can channel the differences through what we talked about, or just kind of conceptualize the differences in your head, but there are differences there. We all know it, right? So those are some real life examples. Now that was a lot, and it's a lot to keep in mind. But it's important to keep this stuff in mind because again, we're all online all the time, all publishing stuff, posting stuff, repeating stuff, retweeting stuff, and we want to stay safe. And these are principles that we need to know of and let our kids know of because they're doing a lot of this stuff too and they have no aptitude or interest in this sort of stuff unless that is we tell them and show them why it's important to be smart and safe and responsible and open-minded and all those sorts of things and themes that make us responsible and safe internet users. Because if we're not, our actions could have real consequences and that's not good, especially because they're avoidable. So keep these thoughts in mind and share them with your family and friends. And that is today's quick shot of legal wellness. I hope you got a lot out of it. And until next time, I'm Danny Karon, your lovable lawyer.